Well, I agree completely that she seems to want to play a bigger role on a global stage. That's understandable and appropriate because China is becoming a major power, not only economically but also militarily. And this is not just a matter of playing a bigger role in bilateral relationships with its neighbors and with the U.S., but also in building a series of international organizations and patterns of behavior institutions that China sees as filling in gaps in the current international system, or perhaps also providing an alternative to more established institutions that were created by the United States or Japan in earlier years. Some of these moves have been welcomed by the United States and by China's neighbors, others have not. So more active Chinese diplomacy, yes, but the results are so far mixed in a variety of ways. I think that this assertiveness is in fact related to a sense of a shift in the balance of power. And it's interesting that Xi's emergence as China's paramount leader was, of course, very shortly after the global financial crisis of the late 2000s. And certainly the United States and the West stumbled very, very badly. China survived relatively well. But now, of course, it's China that is also facing very serious domestic economic problems and financial uncertainties, even as the United States recovers gradually, not completely, but to a large degree. So the question is whether that favorable balance that she may have perceived a decade or so ago, almost a decade now, whether that is now beginning to shift yet again. I think the biggest trend is that a number of countries are seeking a counterweight to China. In some cases, this is clearly the United States, but in other cases, it is groupings, ASEAN, for example. Some, I think, may be increasingly interested in India, especially if they're located near India. Some will be interested in Japan. So I think that there is a quiet balancing that is going on against China. And hopefully the Chinese leadership will see this and will see the signals that this is sending and adjust their policy accordingly. I think that, again, it's a very, very mixed picture. I think in general, I would say that it's gone in the right direction. There have been some mistakes. I think it was a mistake to be so resistant or reluctant to see China have a bigger role in the IMF. I think it was a mistake to have such a absolute opposition to the creation of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So there have been some mistakes. Others would say that a second mistake was that we were too slow to respond to the rise of China and the challenges it was posing to the region. Indeed, that we were turning away from Asia too much in our preoccupation with the Middle East, Southwest Asia, to some degree South Asia. What's interesting, if you look at the history, in fact, you can think of no election that was more consequential for the U.S.-China relationship than the election of 1968 and the election of Richard Nixon. So clearly elections do make a difference. And in that sense, a very, very positive difference. I do think that the Chinese see a pattern, which I understand. It's not inaccurate, but I worry that they think it's an iron law of American politics, that presidents come into office talking tough about China, saying all the ways in which they'll stand up to China on various issues, and then back down and back away. And that did happen most famously with Bill Clinton and Lincoln of MFN, most favored nation status to human rights. Also a bit with George W. Bush with regard to saying I'll treat China not as a partner but as a strategic competitor, and then to some degree backing away from that. But I think that I see that what's likely to happen in a new administration is not anything dramatic that will be then backed away from, but basically a more generalized view of China as being a competitor rather than a potential partner. Not an enemy, but a competitor. And I don't think that we will back away from that as significantly as we might back away from very specific tough policies that an ill-advised president might conceivably adopt or try to adopt.